Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loca here. Join me today as we pot up some Coleus seedlings. So let's go. I live in New Hampshire. I garden in USDA Zone 5B, and based on my zip code, my average last frost date is around May 15th. Today is March 7th, and I'm about 10 weeks away from my average last frost date. It's been a number of years now since I've been growing Coleus from seed. It's actually pretty easy to grow that plant from seed. Together we sowed the seeds of Coleus, and we did that on February 27th. That was 8 days ago. And in case you've missed the video where I showed you how I sow my Coleus seeds, I'll put a link to that down in the description. When I felt a good percentage of my seedlings had germinated, I then removed my tray off of the seedling heat mat, and I also removed the humidity dome. However, the tray has continued to stay under my grow lights. My grow lights come on at 5 a.m., they go off at 9 p.m. So they're on for about 16 hours a day. They are LED lights, so they're very efficient, and they really don't cost a lot of money for me to run each day. Also, my trays have holes in the bottom of them, which allows me to bottom water the trays. That is very important. I don't want to be spraying the tops of my seedlings with water. That can introduce a lot of fungal issues, including damping off. So this is what the seedlings look like now. You can see that I sowed a ton of seeds. And if you'll recall, these were seeds that I collected myself. I've had great germination. I prefer to multi-sow my seeds in modular trays like restaurant takeout containers. One of the reasons I like to do that is to save space under my grow lights. If I was to sow the seeds in, let's say, a 6-cell pack, what I find happens is sometimes I have cells that are empty. So this way, when I'm multi-sowing them in a modular tray, I can have more control. It saves a lot of space under my lights, and I can prick out only the seeds that have germinated. Even though my seedlings only have their cotyledon leaves, which are their first leaves, I will be pricking them out today. And there are a number of reasons for that. One of the reasons is I have a lot of plants going on, and I just have to tackle this project when I have the time. You can wait if you want. If you want to wait until there are a few sets of leaves on your plants, you can absolutely do that. For me, it's more of a timing thing. I just need to tackle this when I have the time. When we initially sowed the seeds, we sowed them in DIY seed starting mix. Today, when we pot them up, they're going to get moved into potting mix that I've also made myself. You can use whatever potting mix you want for your seedlings. I prefer to make my own because I do a lot of seed starting, and I also use the same materials outside when I'm filling up different containers and hanging baskets, as well as my raised bed. The recipe that I'm using right now is 4 parts of peat moss, although you can use cocoa coir. I like to buy my peat moss at a local garden center where I can buy it in bulk, to 1 part of vermiculite, and I usually buy a big bag of that off of Amazon, to 1 part of perlite, and I also buy a nice large bag of that on Amazon. And then I sprinkle the top with dolomite lime. It's basically a garden lime in a powder form, and I usually buy that locally at a big box store. The lime helps offset the pH of the very acidic peat moss, but if you're using cocoa coir, then you don't need lime. When it comes to potting up my plants, I prefer to pre-moisten the potting mix. And the way I pre-moisten my potting mix is by pouring boiling water on it. I like to do that not only to pre-moisten the mix, but also to kill off the chance of any fungus gnats that might be living in there. Fungus gnats love wet soil. So if you do buy potting mix, seed starting mix, or even peat moss that's wet, there is a chance that you have fungus gnats in there. Also, if you buy any kind of mix from a store and there are holes in the bag, there's a chance that fungus gnats got in there. That's why I like to pour the boiling hot water on there, just to kill off the chance of any fungus gnats that might have eggs in there. The big thing is make sure that your seed starting or potting mix has cooled down before you handle it if you are going to pour the boiling water on there. I then like to transplant my seedlings from these modular restaurant takeout containers up to 6-cell packs. Many years ago, I invested and bought some 6-cell packs on Amazon. I also bought some 6-cell packs and trays locally at Ocean State Job Lot, which is close to me and it has really good prices. But for the last number of years, I've actually been able to get these type of items for free. Facebook Marketplace is a great place to look for free items that are garden related. Also, ask family, friends, neighbors. A lot of times people buy plants and they end up with lots of pots and trays that they don't want anymore. So you can definitely recycle and reuse items like that and get them for free. The 6-cell packs get placed in what's called a 10 by 20 tray, and I like to use a solid bottom tray. The reason it's called a 10 by 20 tray is simply due to its dimensions. It's 10 inches one way by 20 inches the other way. You don't need to use a 10 by 20 tray when it comes to holding your pots or when it comes to bottom watering plants. You can use foil trays that you get at Dollar Tree. You can use really anything that can hold water and that you can bottom water plants in. Next, I'm going to show you my process for transplanting and potting up the Coleus seedlings. When it comes to the potting mix, if you were to squeeze it and you see water dripping, that means it's too wet. Your seedlings will end up rotting. You don't want it too wet. However, when you let go, you want the potting mix to hold its form. If it's crumbly and not holding its form, that means the potting mix is too dry and you need to add more water. You always want to make sure, no matter what container you're using, that it has proper drainage holes in the bottom of it. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to add our potting mix to our 6-cell pack. When I bump up seedlings, I don't like to bump them up into extremely large pots. And a big reason for that is not only that I want to save room under my lights, but I also want to have control over the moisture. If you were to pot up in too big of a container, you don't have as much control over the moisture, and you might end up giving too much water to your seedlings. So what I'm doing here is I'm just pressing down. I want to make sure I'm removing any sort of air pockets that are in here. You want to compress that down, but you don't want to press down too hard either. When it comes to the air pockets, that affects the bottom watering. If you have air pockets in there, what's going to happen is your seedlings are not going to get the amount of water that they need. The biggest way that I can tell that a seedling needs water is by picking up a pot or a container. And if it feels very light, that tells me it needs water. Another indicator is if the soil is starting to turn a light brown. But I would say that the number one indicator is by weight, not necessarily by the color of the soil. Sometimes the soil can be light dry, yet when you pick it up, it's heavy. So I would say do the weight test over the color of the soil test. Also, I will say no matter what container you're using, don't skimp out on your potting mix. Make sure you fill it to the top, because what's going to happen is that plant is eventually going to fill up that pot. It's going to get bigger. So you want to make sure you're adding the right amount of soil regardless of the size of your container. I think it's a very good idea to add labels to your 6-cell packs or your pots, just so you don't forget what the plant is. I like to use something like a pen to make holes inside of my 6-cell pack. It just makes it easier, so when I prick out my seedlings, I can easily place the seedling inside each of the holes. And I know that the seedlings do not have a very deep root to them, so I'm not pressing all the way down. When it comes to pricking out my seedlings, many times you'll find me wearing my reading glasses. It's all part of the aging process, my friends. Depending on how close my seedlings are and how small my seedlings are, I'll use a pen or sometimes I'll even use a toothpick. This morning I pricked out all of these seedlings here, and I actually used a toothpick because the Coleus seedlings here were pretty small. They were bigger than what you're seeing, but they were smaller than those guys there. And I just think that a toothpick is a nice way to prick out seedlings, but you can also use a pen. Both methods work for me. So we're going to be pricking out or pulling out a Kong mixed Coleus seedling. When it comes to handling your seedlings, you always want to handle a seedling by its leaf. You don't ever want to handle it by its stem. If you handle a seedling by its stem and the stem breaks, basically the seedling is no longer good. If you handle a seedling by its leaf, you still usually have another leaf that's on the plant. The plant needs the leaf just to be able to still photosynthesize and grow. And it can do that with even just one leaf on it. Trust me, I've done it before where I'm pricking out a seedling and the cotyledon leaf has come off. It's okay. Just don't handle it by its stem and you'll be fine. So we're going to get right under there and we're going to try to very carefully get the seedling out. And that's what the roots look like on the seedling. And then you just want to get the roots beneath soil level. You want to make sure that the leaves are above soil level. And I'm just using something like a pen, but you can use your finger, and you just want to backfill around the base of your seedling. And I like to make sure that the stem is buried enough underneath the potting mix, because why start off with a very leggy seedling if you don't need to? And that's just a side view of what our little seedling looks like. The Coleus seeds were not pelleted. They were very, very small. So doing this process works for me, but you might not want to do this. You might want to just go ahead and sow your seeds in something like a 6-cell pack, and that's fine also. You can sometimes sow 2 or 3 seeds in each cell and then thin them out from there. When it comes to where to start when you have this many seedlings, I do try to find an area or a patch where, for whatever reason, it might have been empty, like this area right here. That way I have easy access to getting to the seedlings. I'd rather do that than start where there's a heavy patch like this. I prefer to leave little tiny seedlings like this in the cell tray for a while. I really just try to go after the much bigger seedlings that are in here. And then a lot of times I'll use the back of the pen and I'll come in and I'll just press down, because honestly, there's probably some additional seeds that are in here that have yet to germinate. And I'm just showing you another area where I had already pricked out seedlings. See, I left some of the small guys behind. They didn't need to come out. And then I came in here with the back of my pen and I just pressed down, just to kind of clean up the area and in case there are any other little seeds that are going to germinate. It's a delicate process, that's for sure, but it's a process that I enjoy. I have a lot of fun with this. And I like showing you how I do things. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the right way to do it, but it's how I do it. And I'm finding from a lot of you, when you leave your comments, which I really enjoy, by the way, that many of you also do something similar to what I do, which is really neat, because I thought that I'm the only person that enjoys this process, but I'm finding out I'm not. And by the way, if you don't enjoy this process, that's okay too. This is a no judgment zone. My goals for my video are to inspire you, and I do want to bring you along with the process of how I'm doing things. I don't want to just start the seeds and then leave you hanging. I want to bring you along. I want to show you any issues or any problems that I ran into, and hopefully it also gives you an opportunity to share with me with how you're doing or any issues that you ran into that maybe I can help you with. I do like to make sure that I have watered this really well before I start pricking out the seedlings, and I definitely recommend that. So I made sure I bottom watered this before I started this whole process. Just backfilling some more. Now in doing this process, I'm definitely moving seedlings around. Like you can see right here, this guy got moved around. And let's say I'm done for the day. So what I could do is come in here and just press down. Let's say I'm done and I have some errands to run. I'm just going to press down and make sure that all my little plants are anchored in until I get back to them. Under my grow lights, I'm making sure that all these little seedlings that I've been potting up, that the really short little ones like this, are all on the same row of my grow lights. I don't want to put very tall plants on the same row as these little tiny seedlings. That way I can bring the lights right down to them. And that's what that looks like. Here's the tray that I worked on earlier, and these are the Coleus mix. So I need to make sure I add a label in here, and I will only keep Coleus mix seedlings in this tray. And as more seedlings germinate, I can then go ahead and keep adding them. And how great is that? If I can fill up this whole 10 by 20 tray, that is 12 times 6, so 72 seedlings in just this one tray. And for reference, they all came out of this area here. And like I mentioned, I still have some that are coming up. So if that little area turned into 72 plants, that's a pretty sweet deal. And we pricked out 6 plants, and we still have all of these to go for the Kong mix. Just for reference, I want you to see that all the plants that are down under here are all about the same height. They're a mix of plants under here. There might be petunias, there might be impatiens, but they're all very small. Whereas over there, those are some taller plants. And so the lights are a little bit higher in that case. I have some lavender there, and lavender is fine. It doesn't need to have the lights right on top of them. Same with the onions. The onions are fine if the lights are a little bit higher. but I'm making sure that my taller plants have the lights a little bit higher and my very short plants have the lights nice and close. So going forward, I will be bottom watering my seedlings. I will also be giving them fertilizer once they have what's called their first set of true leaves. When a seed first germinates, it has everything it needs. It doesn't need fertilizer. In fact, when it gets its first leaves, which are called cotyledons, the plant still doesn't need fertilizer. But once it gets its next set of leaves, those are called true leaves, that's when the plant has run out of all the nutrients that it has inside of it and it needs the fertilizer at that point. For my flowers, I use Miracle Grow all-purpose fertilizer. It's a granular fertilizer that gets mixed in with the water. And initially when I'm fertilizing my seedlings, the fertilizer is diluted 1/2 the strength as indicated on the package. Once the plants get much bigger, at that point I can then use full strength fertilizer. I'll also add a link to a video in the description that I made that talks further about how to bottom water and how to fertilize seedlings. My grow lights are only 2 to 3 inches above my seedlings. I want the grow lights to be close because I want my seedlings to be strong. If the grow lights are too far from my seedlings, what's going to happen is the seedlings will end up being too leggy. You don't want leggy seedlings. You want nice, robust, strong seedlings. I've had questions about what my grow lights look like. I'll also put a link to that video in the description that goes more into detail about my grow lights and how they're all set up. I have an oscillating fan in my grow room that runs 16 hours a day. It comes on when the lights come on, it goes off when the lights go off. The reason you want a fan in your grow room is so that you can have nice, sturdy plants. And it mimics what the seedlings will go through when they go outside and it's nice and windy outside. The fan also dries the top layer of the soil, and that helps control any sort of fungal issues. If you're growing Coleus from seed, is it your first year or have you been doing it for a number of years? And how are your seedlings doing? I'd love to know. And until the next video, make it a great day with gardening.